Good morning, everyone. It is 10:30. Time to start our CARES Subcommittee meeting for September 10th. I'm being told we all have all of our members here. So Wayman, can you please read the virtual guidance?
Sure will. Pursuant to Governor Whitmer's Executive Order 2020-154, the Kent County Board of Commissioners COVID Relief Subcommittee, in order to protect the public health, will conduct this meeting today via electronic communications. Any member of the public wishing to listen to the proceedings or provide public comment may do so by using the following internet connection or phone numbers and passcode, which is also listed on the agenda that's posted on the screen. Anyone disrupting the meeting by using offensive language or offensive actions will be muted and or removed from the meeting. You may send also public comment to publiccomment@kentcountymi.gov via email.
Great, thank you, Wayman. We are on to item 2 of our agenda, approval of the minutes from the August 27th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Moved by Breeby.
Support by Stack.
Moved by Commissioner Breeby, support by Commissioner Stack. Questions or comments on the minutes from the last meeting? Don't see any. Don't see anything in participants or chat. All right, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. We are on to item 3. Before we go on to item 3, I want to welcome Commissioner Ponstein to our subcommittee. He's replacing Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Ponstein, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were on every single other subcommittee or close to it, so you are up to speed on everything we've been doing, and appreciate your willingness to serve on the subcommittee. So welcome, Commissioner Ponstein. We're on to item 3, the Small Business Recovery Program update, and I want to make sure Dante from the chamber is here. Dante,
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm here.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
How we doing on small business program?
We're doing good. We're doing good. If I can have the ability to share my screen.
Yep.
I can give share a little presentation that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. I just have a very brief update, and then would like to discuss a proposal that we have as well. So everything is going great. We have received over 2,000 applications, actually 2,680 applications as of Friday. We do have 2,004 of the applications already through the process and that have been recommended for funding. That equates to about $14 million in approvals. 1,195 checks have been sent, representing over $11.6 million that has gone out. We still have about $4 million in the pipeline. So what this means is that we have about probably $6 million left in the fund that will be probably spent in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're estimating. Want to share a little bit of the demographics of the applicants and recipients that we're seeing. White Caucasian, 33.99% of all recipients. African American, 27.15%. Hispanic Latino, 11.9%. Asian, 10.78%. Multicultural, meaning they identify with several of these ethnicities, is 8.26%. We do have some that do not answer that, and because it's not required, it's not mandatory. So no answer, 6.51%. Middle Eastern, 1.23%, and Native American, 0.19%. Our outreach efforts have been very intentional to serve those underrepresented minority groups, and I think the outcomes speak for themselves. Business sectors that we are seeing: services, 48.6%, food and beverage, other, 20%, food and beverage, 15%, retail 11%, manufacturing 2.2%, and childcare at 1%, representing 11,550 employees that are employed by these recipients. Move on to, are there any questions right now?
Any
Any
questions before Dante proceeds?
I raised my hand, Chair.
Commissioner Jones?
Mhm.
Thank you. Can we go and look at that other business sector? I generally don't mind if the other category is like very small, but I consider that number to be pretty significant. Is that one that you can give us a little more breakdown of?
Yeah, so I don't have the numbers here. Other, hold on, Christian, I'm gonna call, buddy. Yep. So,
Oh, he's so cute. Let him say hello.
yeah.
No, it's okay. We get this.
Yeah. So I'll share with you why that other so high. So it really comes down to how the business identifies themselves. So I'll give you an example. It might be a cleaning service, but they might see themselves as a different sector that's not listed on here. They might not see themselves as services, so they click on other. I've seen applications that are clearly food and beverage, but they see themselves as other. Maybe they represent an area that or a business that just doesn't identify with the ones listed. More than anything, I think it's that scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before Dante proceeds?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Stack, if I could.
Sure.
I'm just struck by the manufacturing at 2.2%, which seems to be a inordinately low number. I know that just by the nature of who we anticipated would be applying, I'm not surprised we would see food and beverage and services at the high end, but manufacturing seems so low. Is that because most of the manufacturers aren't even going to qualify for this? Or are we not reaching out?
Yep. We are reaching out. There's a couple of things. One is, I do believe that manufacturers are poised to maybe receive PPP funding and SBA funding and so forth, and they're kind of like, they've moved on and they're moving. They were shut down, but not shut down too long, and they're just moving forward with it. The other reason I feel that manufacturing is low is that the employee count. Most manufacturers, when they see this, they might think they're beyond that. So, Christian, I'm on the call.
Can I tell you something?
Yep.
Big fish are girls, tiny fish are boys.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's a better answer. Thank you.
Have him bring a bass along next time.
He's into fishing, little guy. Sorry about that. Lost my train of thought there for a second. Other questions that we may have?
I know Commissioner Ponstein has a question, and then let's try to save our questions for Dante to get through the presentation if that's possible.
I have one. Yep, I have one more slide that I want to share with everyone, and that's on a proposal for us to address some of the more identified needs.
Okay. Commissioner Ponstein, did you have a question on the first couple of slides?
No, I'll just wait till the end.
Okay.
Before we go on, Madam Chair, I just want to share the testimonials we're receiving from people who are getting the checks are pretty powerful. I'll just throw in the chat one that just, we happened across here not too long ago. And it's easy to forget sometimes with all the headlines, just the amount of social, financial, mental health risk people take by starting a small business. And this is just an example from Betty's Pages in Lowell. It's a small business person who you know, they gave up a steady paying job to chase their dream, and then, you know, COVID hits, and they're so grateful to receive the check. And I think we've seen those time after time, and I think Dante's included some of the videos we put together as well from some of the other folks. So thank you. I mean, we need to humanize a little bit of this as much as possible. I want the committee to understand that, you know, the impact that this has. It really, it's powerful stuff. Sorry.
Andy, if it's not too long, can you read it, or is it a long email? Muted. You're muted.
You know, to say this is a weird year would be an understatement. When I left my steady paying, interesting but predictable life in banking to open this, but I can't do it. So,
Okay.
you know, it requires a lot of sacrifice,
Okay.
the challenges. And then, she's thanking all the people that have supported her and encouraged her to keep applying for these grants. And so she mentions a huge thank you to Kent County for the commitment to small business. Sorry, I'm a big softie. I lose it, you know, at commercials and the president's speech and Independence Day.
So you're getting a little verklempt. It's okay. All right.
Madam Chair, we do have,
Yep.
I believe Pam has a link to a video that, if she
Okay.
could.
Sure.
I unshared my screen, so is it Pam that's going to share this?
Did you send that to me in an email?
I believe we did. Mia sent it yesterday to, I believe, Linda, or on Wednesday, sent it to Linda. Linda, you on the call?
I'm sorry, I don't have it.
I am. I will find the link you sent me. I thought it also had gone to Pam, but I will forward it to Pam so she can get it out to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I can jump into the next slide, Madam Chair, and talk about one of the needs that we are seeing. I'll share my screen again. One of the needs that we are seeing that's very that's very urgent is those businesses that are in industries that are still closed or have been closed up until recently. And I'll share with you, we're seeing a very significant number of businesses that are just about to close shop permanently because their industry has been closed and they have been receiving zero revenue or very little revenue for the last 5 to 6 months. So I'd like to share with you a proposal that we'd like this committee to entertain on what would we be serving. Can everyone see my document?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a proposal to support businesses that remain closed. And this fund is intended for those businesses that have been closed by the governor's executive orders as of August 1st. The fund provides grants just like this grant program that we've been administering, but in the range of $10, $20, $30, and $40,000. Why? Because we understand that this is the urgency is there. We did not anticipate these businesses being closed that long and being so long without any revenues. The business sizes will be categorized as follows: 0 to 10 employees, 11 to 20, 20 to 30, and then 30 plus. Again, we're going to be, some of these businesses that would qualify have already applied, and we would take that into account, understanding that they're still closed. They might have applied in June, and that $5,000 helped them back then. But because they still, as of August 1st, still not open, it's a very dire situation that they find themselves in. And again, this would only be for the businesses that are in the executive orders for not being able to open. So what does that include? You know, that includes indoor theaters, cinemas, performance venues, indoor gymnasiums, fitness centers, recreation centers, sports facilities, and so forth. Indoor services or facilities or outdoor services or facilities involving close contact of persons for recreation or entertainment purposes, such as amusement park, arcades, bingo halls, bowling alleys, indoor climbing facilities, and so forth. It does not, hold on, Christian. Sorry about that. Yep. It does not include outdoor fitness classes, athletic practices, training sessions, or so forth. It does not include services necessary for medical treatment as determined by a licensed medical provider, healthcare facilities, any of that. Businesses must demonstrate current revenues do not exceed 25% of revenue from the same period in 2019. So what does that mean? That means that there are some fitness gyms that were doing some type of maybe outdoor parking lot yoga classes or so forth. That, Christian, hold on, buddy. That means that we have that they technically were open, but not really. I mean, they still have the huge overhead of their space, but probably 10% of the revenue that they're used to. They were just hustling, trying to keep some members active and some customers active and loyal to their business. So we put that provision in there that allows them up to 25% of revenue compared to this same period last year. If it's a business that would be, if it's a new startup that started and they don't have financials for the prior year, we would still look at other factors to determine where they really impacted or closed because of the executive order. Want to quickly talk about the scoring metrics. Again, very similar to the, excuse me, to the prior or the current fund that we are administering. We do have, hold on, let me share my other screen. Are we back to the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I don't see my last slide. Oh, what happened here?
We're seeing proposal to support businesses that remain closed.
Okay. Yep. My last slide, and I don't know why it's not appearing here. My last slide was what we estimate this, the number of businesses to be, and we think we feel that we're thinking that if the number of businesses that need to be served in this area is around 250. We're thinking at an average of about $20,000 each. We're thinking an investment of about $5 million that we need to support these businesses that are really in dire circumstances right now. Again, when we started this fund, we realized that this program could cover many different businesses, and it was a lot more broader. But now as the program has progressed, we've identified that, gosh, those that are still being impacted by the executive order closures, those are like on life support right now. And it's gonna take even those ones that as of August 1st have now started to be open with this recent opening, they're going to need a lot to get back on their feet. They're so much underwater that we feel a more appropriate investment of 10, 20, 30, or even 40,000 is needed in this time. Andy, is there anything that I missed that you'd like to add?
Just a couple things. One, we want to make sure that we're supporting businesses that have followed the rules. So you can't have had a citation from the county health department during this time, if you were running your business when you shouldn't have been. And then we also put in there that if the majority of the business's revenue was generated by if your business was serving closed businesses and you can demonstrate that you meet that 25% revenue requirement, you'd be eligible as well.
Okay. Do we want to look at the video real quick and then start discussion?
Sure.
Pam, you have that ready to go?
Yes.
Great.
We had just finished building out this brand new space. I remember saying to myself that we did this. And then when COVID hit, I found myself looking around saying, wow, this is all about to be gone. This is all about to be taken away. We've seen 41% of Black businesses close their doors, and many of them are not going to open their doors again. And I just felt like I couldn't be that statistic. Being a recipient of this grant to me, it means that they believe in not only me, but they believe in this business. And so we want to say thank you for that. This grant is going to allow us to buy in bulk bottles. That's what's keeping us going. Having our juices at Bridge Street Market and having them delivered to homes and to businesses, not only here in Grand Rapids, but across the country. We're here today. We're still going strong. We still have some adjustings that we have done. We're still making adjustments. Once you feel like you have it and you understand, then there's a change and you got to shift another way. You got to shift another way. And I feel that it's important to have our business open and operating during COVID-19 for the simple fact that our products are good for the community. The things that we serve, they make you healthy or healthier. They make you smile. We want to make sure that our brand is strong, even after COVID. And you can't just all of a sudden have a strong brand. You have to build, you have to plant those seeds. And we see this as a continuation of planting those seeds in our community. So that when this is all over, we don't want anyone to say, man, wasn't there a juice bar downtown somewhere? No, you're gonna know our name, and it's Malamai Juice Bar and Eatery.
Thank you, Pam. One of the, that's one of the, 2,000 businesses that has received funding as of now. And I think it's a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit that we have here in King County, but also a very much testament to the economic conditions that they find themselves in right now. And that's what has led us to, again, take a look at the need for that what we're estimating to be between 200 and 300 businesses that need that additional support, more intentional support to offset those losses that have occurred as of because of the executive orders. And again, we're thinking about maybe on average $20,000 of support for these 250 businesses that we've identified.
So Dante, I'll say a couple things. One, I'm with Andy, like I almost teared up a little bit watching that video. And then also now I'm super hungry and want to go get a smoothie. So with that, let's open it up for questions. Commissioner Skaggs did request that, wondered if you could make sure that PowerPoint presentation was sent to all of us as well so that we have that. Saw that in the chat.
Absolutely.
And Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. So my question's for Dante or Andy. When we started this process, I'm sure you sat down and thought about the scope, what we can expect. Now that we're this far along in the process, is there anything that has surprised you with what's come in, how it's come in? And even to a bigger question is, when COVID is finally a thing of the past, is there anything we've learned from this moving forward?
Well, I can go ahead and start, and Andy, you can share. One of the biggest things that I'm surprised, but not surprised, but still I want to share is the sheer resiliency that we're seeing with entrepreneurs. We're seeing business owners that have not taken a dime home in the last 6 months, and they're still at it, and they're still making it happen and doing what they can for their employees. Probably what I was not expecting is, again, the duration of the negative impact that this is having. Even the food scene right now in Grand Rapids, starting on Monday when the weather got cold, we're talking to several restaurant owners who are saying, yikes, I was maybe about 35-40% capacity or in sales, and all of a sudden, now that I can't see people outside because it's cold, no one wants to eat outside, I'm back to close to zero. And that's very concerning because the climate is changing, and we're, the weather's getting colder for as we're having an early fall. So the impact that they're having, it's very severe. It's a lot more than what initially I thought in the beginning. I thought we'd get them $5,000-$10,000 and that'd be good, and they're on their way to recovery. It's been too long, and they're hurting a lot more.
Yeah, I'd say the same along the lines of what Dante said. You really get a look into these small businesses, and you're very grateful that people are willing to take the risk to start small businesses when you look at what their revenues might be, and how they're really trying to make a living by chasing their dream, and hearing their stories on the time and investment. I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but a reminder. And then how this is continuing. I just received a text from somebody yesterday saying, hey, I had to pay my taxes. Is there anything else there? Because just because you're open doesn't mean the customers have come back, that you can operate at full capacity. I mean, gym owners, for instance, we did a press conference last week asking for more reopening, and later that day, I think it was because of the press conference, but later that day, the governor announced gyms could reopen. And the response was, this is a great first step, but 25% is going to be really tough to make it, going forward. I think, Stan, also the other thing we've run into too, and this wasn't a surprise, it's more of a barrier. Our small business owners are very proud. People think, other people need the help and not them. And yeah, so we run into that a lot. And so it's just communicating to them that these are your tax dollars. This is what the county is intending them for. You need this because we want you to succeed. There's a little bit of that barrier to applying and adoption that I think we still need to work to overcome. I don't know if any marketing can do it. It's a little bit of that hand-to-hand combat that's necessary.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little because I had one business in my district that I really had to coax and encourage, and she emailed me later and said, I'm so glad you really pushed me, because literally the week after I applied, our freezer went out and I was trying to source outdoor lawn furniture, and it was a lot more expensive than I thought it would be because of just the environment, and everybody's doing outdoor furniture now. And so she was really thankful, but she would not have normally applied, because that's kind of our West Michigan spirit, is we want to take care of others and not initially ourselves sometimes. And so I'm hearing the exact same feedback. I know Commissioner Breevy's hearing that again in our shared area of Caledonia as well. So any other questions or comments on the small business? And then it's my understanding you are proposing an additional $5 million for these small businesses that were closed. Looks like Commissioner Steck and then Commissioner Skaggs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bolter. I wanted to talk a little bit about the proposal to expand or to create a new component of support to a defined segment. And I just wanted to have maybe Andy and Dante flesh that out a little bit for us. I mean, I do think that it has logic and reason, and I think in general I support it, because I think that there are segments of our economy that are uniquely impacted because of the length of time in which they've now been compelled to stay closed. But I understand the gym and the fitness components. That's our Planet Fitness kind of entity or businesses like that. The entertainment venues and entities would also be included in that. And of course, these are many organizations and institutions that are kind of culturally important to our communities. But can you just describe a little bit more who all would be fit in this? Because I see that it's really not small is not the defining term, because you have 30 plus employees as one of the categories. So I don't think that we're talking necessarily small business. We're talking about any kind of business that's impacted in this way. Would, for example, entities like the Deltaplex be a qualifying entity? Would large cinema organizations that are multi-county or multi-state qualify? So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Nope.
Yeah, Stan, I think, we've been very specific on, who qualifies for this, bowling alleys, et cetera. I think we can serve a lot of these small businesses through this fund. We already know partly, who they are already, and we're going straight off the governor's.
All right, Andy, can I interject a second? Can somebody mute? We're getting a lot of feedback in the background. I don't know if that's where that is, but thank you. Sorry.
No, and so that's how we built, kind of the proposal, and Dante went, over that, and I think there's the real need out there. Are your questions more about the specifics of how we're gonna, review the applications? One of the things I would mention is that we did increase the employee count, right? So we could get something to those businesses. Some of those larger businesses, boy, it's going to take a whole heck of a lot more, like them getting open to really help them. But this will at least give them something to help them maybe make a decision between keeping employee health benefits or not. So that was one of the big changes, that you see in this proposal versus the previous one.
Yeah, again, my understanding is that technical definition would be any entity that's subjected to the last executive order that required closure. So I'm just looking for general understanding about what's the spectrum of businesses that
so
all
that
encompasses.
spectrum is indoor theaters, cinemas, performance venues, indoor gyms, those kind of things. It's all very specific into the in the executive order. Dante read them out. Amusement parks, arcades, bingo halls, bowling alleys, indoor climbing facilities, indoor dance areas. I'm sure the Stecks frequent that regularly for a little square dancing. Skating rinks, trampoline parks for the grandkids, Stan. It's pretty specific. And again, we just took the boilerplate from the executive order to do it.
Okay, so what the second thing I wanted to talk about is, and I have one of those in, I think, my district that actually closed. They held on as long as they could, and they finally just closed up because they could not sustain it any longer. And my guess is that there are other entities that have similar kinds in this category that have similar kinds of on the verge of just about going down. Do we have any analysis about what would be required to affirm that if we provide grants that they would be entities that will continue to be around?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we put in as the metrics is the stability of the business. Are they going to be able to continue to survive going forward? It's a bit of a judgment, right? And, taking what we're hearing from the applicants, because the business closures are happening. A lot of restaurants are closing permanently. And I think we'll see that with some other gyms as well. So that's one of the things we're going to have to do through the review to see what their financial position is. And these are grants, right? And you got to remember that these go to people typically, right? We wanted to use it to support them to keep their employees there. But also it's going to these small business owners themselves. So even if they might have to close eventually, maybe we just extend their life a little bit. Business life.
And again, this is something that we're looking at We looked at over 2,000 applications received. It's really about 10% of those that fall into these categories that are just in very, very dire situation right now. Even those that have finally been allowed to open back up, as we've been having conversations, they don't have much to open back up with. Many of their employees have moved on. Their customer base has moved on. You take a membership for a local gym. Many, they can't go to their gym. They're going to cancel their membership. And as those facilities, they get their the big inflow of new members at the beginning of the year, or we're in the middle of the year. Everybody's busy, and they're not going to see a lot of members join now. So it really is throwing an additional lifeline to them to get them by and get them sustainable again.
Anything additional, Commissioner Stack, before we move on to Commissioner Skaggs?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, guys, I got 6 things. So number one, they're short ones. Number one, you're asking for $5 million. That would be 100% of the businesses would be getting somewhere in the middle of the amount of money. What's going to happen if you're unable to spend that $5 million? Because I wonder if you're actually going to get 100% applicants and 100% okayed. That might be a question. That might be a question for the chair or for the county administrator.
I think whatever lapse money, which we'll be discussing at the next meeting, would probably go back into our reserve. And we have to discuss at our next meeting and probably the meeting in October where we want to reallocate some funding for the reserve.
Okay, but we'd be reallocating that. It wouldn't automatically go into the small business relief fund.
That wouldn't be my intention, but we
could decide that later.
Probably need to decide that as a committee. Yep.
Okay. Number 2, you mentioned revenue replacement as a possible reimbursable expense here. Did I hear that right?
No, we're measuring the businesses that Dante was giving the example that some of these yoga studio or whatever, fitness folks have been doing outside classes. Mm-hmm. So we want to recognize that they may have, despite being closed, have generated some revenue from outside sources. So that's where we had that, 25% revenue requirement in the proposal, where that businesses must continue to demonstrate current revenues do not exceed 25% of the revenue from the same period. All the other applications in terms of what are the allowable uses for the funds remain the same as the small business program. There's no changes in the allowable uses for the grant.
Okay. We didn't want to penalize a business because they were still trying to hustle and thinking outside the box and trying to have some revenue. They shouldn't be penalized, especially if it amounted less than 25% of what they would have been making had they been open.
No, I think that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that there was some clarity on that, since, if the opera doesn't come through, or if the Clash doesn't come through, or whatever, that would be a dream. We're not replacing that lost revenue, right? We're looking at labor expenses. We're looking at,
overhead,
expenses as with everything else. Okay, great. Eligible businesses. Andy, you talked a little bit about businesses that did not abide by the executive orders, and that the definition of that would be if they had a citation from the health department. Do you have any idea how many businesses had citations from the health department?
I've only heard, I haven't heard a specific number.
I wonder if we can tighten that up a little bit, or at least have them sign, check a box and sign that they were in compliance with the law. That'd be good. Can we do that?
Yeah, we can add that to the form.
Okay. Number 3 or 4. I know that there were some businesses that I've talked to. I'm skipping back and forth. This is going back to the small business relief part and not the new, extended close part. I know a couple of businesses I've talked to got maybe $5,000 or $10,000, even though they put in for more, and they thought that those expenses were qualified. As we go into the final period of this fund, will there be any decision to look at going back to businesses that didn't get the full amounts of the request? If you felt that a request was worthy, if we feel like we've given everyone the opportunity to apply, are we going to be able to go back to those that didn't get everything that they felt that they were?
I think, Phil, or Commissioner, I think that's I think that's kind of the conversation maybe after this to talk about too. Again, as we're mentioning, this is not over. This is continuing. So should we give businesses that maybe don't qualify for this closed fund another bite at an apple somewhere down the line? Maybe, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, possibly, or for whatever expenses at whatever date you guys that we all decide on. But yeah, I know I talked to 3 or 4 businesses that were like, we asked for 20, we thought we had a good argument for 20, we got 10. So I guess it's not necessarily a second bite at the apple as far as another application, but a second look at the application to decide, there's a little bit money left over. Maybe we can be more generous with those that applied.
So a couple of things. I in my estimates, I do believe 100% that we will not have any money left over. The need is still great, and it's about spreading it apart. The review committees are the ones who determine or who recommend the dollar amounts, and although in the application it does not ask how much do you want, or what's your request. It doesn't ask for a request. We do know that there's some businesses that are hoping for the full 20 because they need it. We understand that we need to pay attention to that and maybe survey and ask where are you at, because that could be an indicator of additional funding that businesses might still need should an opportunity arise. With the current fund that is there, with a little over $6 million that's still available, I am very confident that will be exhausted within 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, so that leads me to question number 5. Given that, have you devised a hard deadline yet for businesses to apply that we can spread? I know it's kind of moving, but.
So we have till the end of the year, but again, it's not going to happen. It's not going to last us for the end of the year. It's going to be gone in 4 to 6 weeks. As we get closer to we're going to manage the pipeline so we understand how much money we do have. And as we get closer, we might put a deadline or an estimated deadline of when the funds would be available. Because the last thing I want is folks to apply and then be like, well, funds are gone. So we want to manage that as best we can. And we'll do that as we get closer to drawing down the fund.
Okay, but basically you think if it's in the next 2 weeks, people are probably good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. I would even say in the next 4 weeks, we would take all the application based on the process and the put through times. I think we're good for the next 4 weeks.
Okay. Last question. I know that later on we're going to talk about childcare, but I saw that childcare was at 1.2%. Clearly, that's an important aspect of people just being able to get back to work that have little ones, which, as I can see, Dante can relate to. What percentage of that is of the businesses that are daycare? I mean, do we feel, and I know that there's been some extended outreach to them. How do you guys feel about that number of 1.2? Are we making sure that our daycares stay open so our people can get back to work?
Well, we do have a very intentional outreach process to daycare providers. We've done several clinics. We have, we're setting up a virtual and in-person clinic next week for a group of Hispanics childcare providers here in King County. I estimate that to be around 500,000 in support for about 150 childcare providers additionally. So we're gaining traction on that, and I do feel that we'll have about $500,000 in grants for childcare additionally than what we've seen right now.
And
But
Commissioner,
it's trending low.
kind of it's also a bit of an issue that Commissioner Jones pointed out with the other kind of category. I think if we went through and scrubbed some of that, not all childcare businesses identified, with that. So I think we could go through and look at that to make sure we didn't miss a bunch that maybe didn't identify that way.
Okay, that's great. I just, if you can, it sounds like you're doing great work on that. Keep up the intentional work to try to help out to target those businesses and make sure that they know about it, so that we have the capacity as we move forward and hopefully unemployment goes down. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to do the math on the 25 million here, and it's a little fuzzy for me. Dante, I thought, said that there were over 2,000 applications recommended for approximately 14 million. And then I've heard this 6 million number tossed about. I thought I initially heard it as an additional amount that that he thought would be allocated to additional businesses. But then I heard later that that's how much was left of the 25 million. So a little clarification would be helpful.
So, yep. So it's really $24.2 million that is in the fund for grants. It's not a full 25 million. Of that $24.2 million that was available, we have written checks for $11.6 million. But there's about probably another 3 million that is already approved, is in the process of getting checked. So I would say we're very close to 14, a little over $14 million that in the next week will be out in checks. And we have about $4 million in the pipeline. So these are applications that have not gone through a review committee yet, but are in the process of we're working with them to get all the information. Again, the cool thing about this program is we don't just have somebody apply and rule them out if they don't do something. We work with them to help them get the application complete. So that leaves us about, in totality, it's about $18 million that are kind of, so to say, spoken for, right? Out of $24.2 million, that's where that 6 million figure comes in. That's really what isn't spoken for, that is still eligible or available for eligible applicants.
Okay, thank you. And could not the $5 million that you're proposing for the new program come out of that 6 million?
It could, and it can. What we're saying, we're estimating really the need. So that $6 million, without a doubt, will go quick, just in the traditional model that we have, the traditional eligibility that we have right now. But we're identifying that there is an additional or greater need for those industries that have been, again, really impacted. So it's really about the need that we're forecasting. That's where the additional $5 million comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the small business original grant before we move on to further discuss the 5 million additional proposal?
And Pam, I'm gonna email you the PowerPoint I'm working off my iPad right now, and For some reason, it's not letting me put it into the chat. So I'll send it email it to you, Pam.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So I have a couple things. One, I just wanted to share, Commissioner Antor had a comment in full board today that if a business applies and is rejected, are we communicating with that business so they know that they were rejected and why? And it sounds like we do a lot of navigation and assistance, but I just want to be sure that the counties work with the chamber, that's what we were doing.
That is correct. We are, they are receiving communication that's from the county and the chamber, letting them know that they have not qualified for, or been awarded a grant. And we're also giving them an opportunity to not reapply, but have a second option to be reviewed. So what the difference is that we're going to spend an additional time. We look at the application and try to determine why wasn't it approved, what was missing. And a lot of times for those few denials, we look and see different comments from the review committee that we want to address. So we do an in-person or Zoom interview with them where we gather more information and then put it through one last review committee. So even those that have been denied up to now, I have a feeling that we can get many of those approved, finally approved, and that's happening in the next couple weeks. So
okay, and then even if they don't get approved, are we communicating that they didn't get approved and why they didn't get approved, so they understand how they didn't meet the criteria, or they understand it?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the proposal is for an additional $5 million for the businesses that have been closed for this extended period of time. I don't know what we want to call it, shuttered businesses or what we want to call this, but it's the businesses that have specifically been closed up until the last week or two, still are not able to operate at full capacity or at all. So that seems to be the proposal. Do we want to discuss this further? Do we want to entertain a motion? Any comments? Commissioner Tanlin.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly would like to have some discussion of it, but would appreciate if we could look at the rest of the agenda and put it into the context of other needs and what funds are not being spent or what additional funds we see needing to be spent. I'm a bit uncomfortable approving it or approving it at this point in the agenda.
Any other comments or concerns? Anyone want to do it now? Anyone want to do it later?
So Commissioner Stack?
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the proposal with respect to the $5 million, again, would be an allocation or a reallocation from the current, is it 18 million set aside or 13 million set aside?
I think it would come out of the current 18 million. We did propose taking the 2 million initially out of the reserve for schools. If you'll remember, that was a discussion. Right. And that's what we did. That's where the school funding came from. This would come out of that reserve fund as well. And we still would have 13 million left over, not including any of the lines that have lapsed or come in under, which would be a discussion for next meeting. But I did have several conversations with Dr. London this week and yesterday as late as last night. He did suggest he will be attending our next meeting to go over all of the health department needs. He wanted a couple extra weeks to kind of get his arms around some more specifics. He understands that we're kind of needing to make decisions. But he said he could see some additional needs, but it wouldn't be anywhere near the amount we have left in reserve. And you know, what I'm hearing from Steve and others is that we are coming in fairly close on all the other lines, but we are getting to a point where these businesses have been closed for almost 4 months, and we do have to start making decisions on some of this reserve money. So that's kind of why I suggested we look at this proposal today.
Well, and I just wanted to clarify that because I think that, as you indicated, we've held back some of this money because we weren't sure what needs might materialize over the course of the subsequent months. And yet we have all committed that we want to spend this money and get it out into our communities if at all possible. And we know that we don't get to keep it past the end of the year. So it seems to me that we are now at a point where we've identified a unique need because of the nature of the closure requirements that's evolved out of our community. We still have funds available for this purpose. It seems to me this is the classic reason why we retain some funds to be able to address this circumstance. And if it does appear as we go forward that we don't have significant, I mean, there may be some others as you've indicated, but it doesn't sound like we're going to have significant other demands evolving, even if we were to bump up some extra money for some of the existing programs. So in general, it seems to me to be a very appropriate and valid utilization of these funds.
I think too, this is one sector of the job providing world. I mean, this impacts unemployment, this impacts employee health insurance, this impacts all kinds of issues, childcare that was mentioned earlier. We didn't foresee this need in April. So I think we all kind of thought that we would put up this small business grant and kind of get through, and hopefully by fall, things are kind of better, and they're not for these businesses because they haven't been able to open safely. And they've, had kind of an extended hardship than everyone else. So if we don't move this today, even if we move this today, it still has to go through full board in 2 weeks. So we're not looking at getting the program up and going until October. So I would really like us to move on this as soon as possible so that we can get this relief to those additional businesses.
And that's, thank you. I was just anticipating a little bit and maybe having Andy and Dante talk about if we get this approved, how much time are we talking to actually implement the program? I know that you've got some of the parameters pretty well fleshed out, but let's say everything is papered and we hit the market tomorrow. How much time? Because it seems to me we're getting near the end of our operating time.
Yep. We would be able to implement right away. Matter of fact, if let's say it was approved at this level, we would begin the outreach and deploy our strategy, tomorrow, and begin getting applications and so forth, and be ready to execute on those as soon as it's finally approved by the larger commission.
Yeah, since we're building off the existing system, Commissioner Steck, I think, we have the ability to do that. And you usually just see our little squares at these meetings, but the chamber team is doing a ton processing, thousands of applications takes a lot of man hours, and the county staff as well. So I think we're at a point too where we've worked so many of the things out to make this run efficiently that I think we can move in a pretty short order.
But even at a short order, it just strikes me that seeing how this functions, even functioning very well with the small business recovery program, it could well be November before we see checks going out to these applicants.
I would say that we could have, within 2 weeks, have a significant number of applications in the process, with recommendations to the county. So once it hits the county, it's probably a week after. So I'm looking at 3 weeks, a 3-week time frame, if we started tomorrow.
Right, and that's assuming that we approve it here, and then it gets passed through the formal approval at the commission level. But I guess my point is that we don't have a lot of time, no matter how effective and how efficient you are. There just isn't a lot of time for this to effectively get through the system and the process in a timely fashion to avoid the potential forfeiture of funds at the end of the year.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. So just a quick question on process. Would it go to finance and then directly to the board? Or is this just, if we have an emotion that the committee recommends, does it just go right to the board?
Chair, if you'd like me to take that,
Yep.
all of the allocations have gone straight to the board since this was a chair-appointed subcommittee. So this one would follow that same path and would go right from this committee to the full board.
Great. And then my other comment on this is I am looking at the presentation and listening, and we reserved the Emerging Needs Fund, which is what I considered the 20 million that was set aside for just that. And I don't know how else you would define an emerging need, because for me, this checks that box. This is a need that has developed since we originally did our plan, and I'm in full support of having this go from here to the board. If we have committee members or board members that disagree, they can always vote no at the board. So I'm curious if we're going to have a motion and we can get this potentially to the board, and then more vetting can happen at that point for those who might not agree.
Commissioner Skaggs.
Is there a motion on the floor?
No, would you like to make one?
Yeah, sure. I'll make one. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve this, special addendum to the Small Business Recovery Program as outlined by Dante and Andy. I think
Stack supports.
ready to go.
Okay.
No, I think that there were certainly good and strong reasons to have these executive orders for the public health of the people of Michigan and Kent County, and certainly think that as we continue to go on and as these businesses are able to devise safe ways to bring people back in because of the success that we've had in this state in dealing with COVID-19. I think this makes a lot of sense. These people didn't go into business trying to find the business that was going to be the most likely to be subject to executive orders on public health. And I think that this is a well thought out program. Certainly, I am sympathetic to Commissioner Talon's concerns about the remainder of the money we have and not deciding it all at once. But I think that there is probably enough money to still be, 13 million, it's a lot of money, for us to still have our discussions going forward about where we might want to reallocate, because there are certainly some priorities that I think are important for reallocation. But as Commissioner Jones says, this was about emergent needs, and I think that, as the chair mentioned, this is something that we did not anticipate. I think the scope and the length of the pandemic, and I think this makes good sense. So I will be supporting my motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Skaggs, support by Commissioner Steck. It looks like I have hands up by Commissioner Talon and Commissioner Ponstein. Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. I really want to be able to support this. And again, I am looking forward to hearing where we're at on funding related to addressing families and individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And when I think about the $3.5 million that we have allocated to that so far, of which not much of that has gone out yet, maybe half, and compare that to potential 30 million that's going to support businesses, that strikes me as problematic for me. Because know there are huge needs out there that we haven't addressed yet, and really want to make sure, and I guess we'll have this discussion later, but really want to make sure that we invite again the organizations that are working with those families and individuals, provide an update and let us know what their additional needs are. We have not invited them to do that, and I certainly think that we should. But I guess I'll wait for further comments until we get to that point in the agenda.
Commissioner, we are going to discuss it later in the agenda as well, but we did have a pretty extensive update in our Human Services meeting this morning from Sandra. If I add up all of the money she laid out, it's almost 8.5 to 9 million that's going to go into housing between the various funds. So we will definitely get you that information. I hope that we can get to that on our agenda as well. But I do want you to know that just because they're not coming before us on every subcommittee does not mean that people are not working on the housing and sheltering issue. A lot of work is being done by staff, and that is an obvious need. Everyone knows it's a need, but they laid out for me an almost $9 million going toward that effort. So again, these are businesses that have been completely shuttered and represent jobs, health insurance. You know, I would like to proceed with this and move on so that we can proceed with the next item on the agenda. So with
Quick follow-up, are these not businesses that, are these businesses who have not received any other form of assistance that will be helped with the 5 million?
They may have received assistance under the initial
PPP
fund,
or
I'm not sure, but they also, we're changing the criteria a little bit to allow, it would only be these businesses, and it also, it increases the grant and increases the FTE amount.
so they also are getting additional funding, not just the CARES Act money.
I don't know that. Dante or Andy, can you?
So it could be businesses that, let's say, got PPP that ran out, you know, a while ago, right?
Like in April or May?
Correct.
I just want to compare apples to apples when we talk about the additional funds that are available for families experiencing homelessness and these businesses. They are also getting support from additional areas. Thanks.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. Just really quick, coming from other governmental units before becoming a commissioner, I would hope that anything we pass today, I mean, this money needs to get out. Every day that passes, another business will close somewhere in the state, and maybe even multiple. So, I mean, for many of these businesses who not only have support jobs, they also pay taxes to keep governmental units functioning. So I would hope if all these things we pass to speed up the timeline, and I don't know what the protocol is for the county commission, is I would like to see a special meeting of the Kent County Commission via Zoom just to address these things so we can get the ball rolling, because every day that passes is another critical junction for some of these businesses that are right now are barely hanging on at no fault of their own.
Any other questions or comments on the motion?
That's Commissioner Steck.
Sure.
Just a quick comment. These businesses aren't likely to have received PPE support from us, are they? Because they've been closed entirely.
Andy or Dante, can you address that?
Yeah, so some of the businesses might have received PPP, and if you recall, PPP was really a wash through. So if you wanted the PPP assistance to be forgiven, you needed to spend all of that on payroll. So even if you were closed and you still had to support your payroll, it was.
Sorry, wait, we're getting our P's crossed up here, PPP and PPE. I was thinking our PPE program.
Oh, correct.
They could
Yes,
have, I can say yes, they could have received that.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that since they're completely closed, it strikes me as that's not likely they would have received much because they wouldn't have needed to use PPE in order to engage with the fellow workers or with the public.
Right, but now that gyms are open, maybe they'd apply. I don't.
Now they might have, yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the motion before we vote?
Yes, my hand is up.
Commissioner Womack.
Yes, I definitely support pushing this through and supporting the motion by Skaggs. These businesses have some serious issues. I visited some of these facilities that have been closed, and when you look at the taxes that they've had to pay just for the summer taxes, which we definitely needed paid, so the county and the state and local municipalities can continue the great services we do for these businesses. But at the same time, as they're closed, I didn't want anybody to think that they're not incurring major expenses as they continue. And most of them, all of them that I know of, still have to have insurance on those buildings. So even some of them now receive some help. Most of the little help that some of them have received from governments hasn't even covered half of the taxes that they're paying on these buildings. So I don't think there's any help that we can give them that would be for naught. I'm sure any help we can give them will help a positive direction in keeping the business open and will continue to employ people. And after COVID-19, the world may be totally different. Jobs that were there before COVID-19 may not still be there. So not only are we helping these businesses, we're helping the job market here in Kent County. And that's one of the main reasons that I do support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we vote? Is everyone comfortable with voting at this point? Because we do have we have 5 more items on the agenda and we're already over an hour into the meeting. So we have a motion, we have a motion by Commissioner Skaggs, support by Commissioner Steck. We've entertained questions and comments. Pam, can you run through a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Steck,
Yes.
Commissioner Breeby,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Ponstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Skaggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Talon,
Yes.
Commissioner Womack,
Yes.
Chair Bolter.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Great. Andy and Dante, please let these businesses know we're supporting them in the best way we know how. And we will get to work on this as soon as we can. And I know you will as well. Appreciate all your work so far. Appreciate your presentation today. Keep us informed and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Awesome. We are going to move on to item 4, not-for-profit assistance program update. I don't know if that's coming from Wayman or
Linda is on the line. She
Linda?
can give a quick
Okay.
one, so we'll try to be brief on this.
Morning, everyone. The Small Business Relief Fund is updated in your report, but Matt Nelson has been sitting in on the actual review committees at the United Way and can probably give you a bit more detailed insight on this. But the United Way we talked to yesterday, and they, like the chamber, have every confidence that they will be able to generate recommendations to the county to expend the entire allocation well before any deadline. But Matt, if you want to fill in some of the details. Matt?
Sure. Sorry, finding the unmute button. My apologies. In the report that we provided, you can see the update in terms of the grant funds that have been distributed so far. There are numerous organizations that are very well known. If you go to the United Way's website, they've listed the grant recipients. Many well-known organizations, as well as some smaller nonprofit organizations throughout the community, have received these grants. As Linda indicated yesterday, the The United Way indicated they thought that they could fully allocate these funds to grants in October. We are working with the United Way right now to expand to some extent the parameters for the United Ways that the United Way is using to vet these programs to address some additional essential needs. So the program to date has been focused on providing assistance for essential needs, and we've identified the need to address some additional homelessness related issues through the United Way program, in addition to what's being done specifically with the dollars that this subcommittee had allocated to homelessness. So some of that nonprofit organization grant relief funds have already gone to organizations that address homelessness, to address Commissioner Talon's earlier question. I would say roughly $400,000 that's already been paid out. And we anticipate additional funds going in that direction from this program, in addition to the $3 million that has been allocated for homelessness assistance itself. And I'm happy to address any additional questions about the program to the extent there are any.
Any questions or comments on the nonprofit line? I just have one clarification on the child care grant. Are we running that through United Way or through the chamber? Like how, just to clarify where and how that's working. And then it looks like Commissioner Talon has a question as well.
Certainly, Chair Bolter. The child care grants are split in two ways. So the actual grants to daycare providers are being routed through the chamber through the Small Business Relief Program. As we looked at the need in that area, we quickly determined that frankly there were more resources available if we routed them through the Small Business Relief Program than if we set up a separate grant program specifically for daycare providers. There's also a specific grant of $450,000 to First Steps Kent, and that is a independent grant that's separate and apart from any of those other programs. To the extent that daycare providers are going to United Way and seeking grants under that program, United Way is referring them over to the chamber to make the application there.
So kind of complicated, but it seems to be working. So people are able to navigate. We haven't heard any bad feedback about navigation issues or concerns.
Not that I'm aware of, Chair Bolter, and the actually in some ways for the daycare providers it's actually easier to go through the chamber's program because there is the built-in assistance available from the chamber to navigate the grant process. So they actually are helping people work through that process, and they have multilingual support.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Heard the phrase expanding the parameters, and I raised the issue last time we met about a couple of organizations that are assisting the county with providing certain services that we've asked them to, who were deemed not eligible for the nonprofit support. Wondering if that's been resolved or is that part of the expanding parameters discussion? So for example, an organization that received dollars for assisting the chamber with the small business grants being deemed ineligible for the nonprofit assistance, even though they were recommended by United Way.
I'm happy to take that unless someone else wants to.
Go ahead, Matt.
Commissioner Talon, that specific organization has been, there is a grant to make up the difference in process for that organization. With regard to other organizations, there's another organization that has potentially has some administrative costs that are associated with assistance that they've been providing to the county. That organization is also would be eligible under the expansion of the United Way program, but there's also been direct discussions with that organization based on their anticipated request for additional funding.
Great, appreciate that update. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this line? I don't see any other hands up. Anyone I'm missing? All right, if we could go back to the agenda, that'd be great. So it doesn't seem like we have any big changes. It looks like we're going to be able to spend down those funds. We're ready to move on, correct? No other questions, comments? All right. Moving on to item 5, assistance to local units of government. This has been something I've been working on with Jeff and Wayman, Steve. Initially, when we did this, I want everybody to remember back in March and April, we were trying to just allocate estimates so we knew where we could put other money and other funds and how we could spend other funds. We did send out extensive surveys requesting that they give us their estimates. Some came back, some didn't. There's a lot of confusion on what they could be used for. There's been a lot of confusion from the state then in the middle of this being directed that they're to use their CARES funding for municipalities. So that kind of, we didn't walk back our 15 million that we set aside, but it could have changed and we could have pulled that back into our reserve fund or more funding for schools or other things. So far the subcommittee has determined to hang on to that 15 million in that bucket. However, conditions have changed through the course of these few months where some of these municipalities are getting enhanced funding from the state, which we weren't sure at the time that they were going to get. It seems to me that the last meeting we weren't in agreement to use these funds for their general law enforcement, even though that was a new allowable determination under the guidelines. So a lot of complaints that I received from municipalities, primarily our largest municipality, was that before we thought the liability was on the county and we would need them to turn in all allowable receipts. At this point, we are a couple months out from having to get this money out. And I do have concerns that our staff, the onus is on our staff to then pour over every single receipt when you've got 21 townships, you've got several cities, villages, and I don't think that our municipalities want to have to ask permission for every receipt that they're submitting. So I did speak with legal last week about would it be an option to do something similar to what we did with schools, where we were able to explain the requirements and the regulations, put the liability then on the entity that's receiving the funds in terms of they have to spend it under the guidance, and then could we kick the money out and front load them the money so that the money's getting out the door, they then can use it for how they deem appropriate under the guidelines, and our staff are not the gatekeepers of every single receipt coming in, which slows down the process. We're already into September. So we worked on that. We did find that legally we could do that. And so at this point, then we have to figure out how can we fairly kick that money out to every municipality in the county. I don't think that some of the smaller townships or some of the villages, have even thought about how they would use it or if they'd be able to use it all. But I do think we need a fair and equitable methodology of how we would push this money out. So open it up for discussion. We've got this 15 million. Do we want to keep it 15 million? Do we want to take 15 million and divide it by population and throw that out? And if it comes back, it could go back into reserve fund. It could go back to the municipalities that still want and think they could utilize more money. Do we want to maybe consider taking 10 million of it and doing the population and 5 million of it and overlaying some sort of metric based on COVID cases, which could be an idea that we could do. So I just kind of want to open this up. Jeff has run some numbers he can provide for us. We don't have to decide today, but I just wanted you to know the context of this work in trying to accommodate and trying to get the money out to our partners, our municipal partners, in the most equitable way I know to do it. So with that, it looks like Commissioners Ponstein and then Brevi.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. Just want to echo your comments. Thank you for your work on this. But at the end of the day, we need to get the money out. I'm in agreement 100%. We don't have the staff at this time and junction. I think the best way is to come up with a formula. If we tweak it, but it needs to be based on population. You know, we represent governmental units throughout Kent County, and but we've got to get it out. And I think your approach should work very well.
Thanks, Commissioner Ponstein. Commissioner Brevi.
Thanks, Chair Bolter. You know, I think we should consider something similar to what we did with the schools, and it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about, where that was per pupil. I like the idea of population, and I know that there's already been some estimates done by many of the municipalities, and I think we could get close to the numbers that they're asking for. And so I think, you know, maybe a first round of 10 million dispersed by population would make sense. And then maybe the next round based on the COVID numbers. But I think we just, like, you know, Commissioner Ponstein said, we don't have the staff to scrutinize each receipt. And I think going through all the government barriers between municipalities takes extra time. And we want these communities to have the money they need to, you know, pay their bills and get the job done. So yeah, I would support, you know, doing maybe 2 phases if we can get the money out to them right away.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. I just had a small list. And the first one is I wanted to remind everyone that this 15 million was based on estimates. We reached out multiple times to our community, asked for estimates based on what they thought would be COVID expenses. And in some cases, they use different criteria to give us those estimates. So as far as that, I believe that part has been completed. And now we have to figure out where we are now and how to roll this out properly. If we could circle back on exactly what criteria can the 15 million be used for governments, and then I want to touch base on the big piece that changed since we set that 15 million, which was what the state of Michigan has been able to assist with our local units of government. Can we kind of tie all that together?
Jeff, do you want to answer some of, Jeff, are you on?
Yep, I'm here. So the criteria, I think that was your first question, would be the same as any other CARES dollars. You know, it has to not have been budgeted, has to be COVID related. Same rules would apply. What's changed since then is that the state of Michigan supplemented the locals with some additional CARES funding. One piece was revenue replacement. In lieu of the August CVTRS revenue sharing payment, they gave all municipalities that normally receive that CARES money, and it was about $6.5 million in Kent County combined, about $2 million outside of Kent County specific, Kent County proper. And additionally, municipalities were instructed to submit public safety payroll for April and May. From the numbers I have, and I don't have everyone's, they submitted at least $15 million in Kent County and this is just some of the bigger agencies. It's anticipated they're going to get somewhere between 50 and 60% of that due to the volume of requests throughout the state. So I'm thinking they'll get another $8 million back to Kent County in that. So combined with those two programs, since we announced the 15 million, the locals, excluding Kent County, should be getting somewhere around $10 million roughly combined, if that makes sense.
Diane,
Yes,
did that answer your questions?
well, it just makes me wonder if that 15 million is still that right target. But aside from that, there's certainly areas, Jeff, where the state didn't fill gaps for our local municipalities. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'll just use Ada Township because it's first on my list. Their original survey, they either didn't complete one or they thought they would have no COVID expenses. They've received $12,042 in CARES money allocation in lieu of revenue sharing. So in order for them to accept that, they need to have at least expenses of $12,042 COVID related. So yeah, that's a complete change from when this program was originally announced. And that's similar, obviously bigger entities like the city of Grand Rapids, they had 11.1 originally. They've received 1.4, almost 1.5 million in CARES money from the state directly in lieu of revenue sharing. So obviously their needs, are a lot different than Ada Township, but those are just two examples of a couple communities, how they were impacted.
Well, I'm all in favor of engaging with this the best way possible, as long as we have a solid process, one that legal's involved with, one that gives the county hold harmless in the event there is acceptance of funds that maybe the municipalities shouldn't accept. But I want to make sure we are perfectly clear on what can and can't be used, and that there can't be any type of double dipping where they have one expense that's reimbursed by the state and us. I think this is a really important lift for legal. And then my thought would be you get these documents out to all of our municipalities and then put the time frames on them too. Here's when we need this back, or the agreement can no longer be executed. I want to see a really solid plan on this, and I would like it to be done sooner versus later. Thanks.
Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Chair, for working on this. I think it's extraordinarily important here because, it is clear, as others have said, that the difficulty of a thorough look at receipts is just something that's perhaps beyond our capacity, and that moving to a block grant system with those legal liabilities transferring probably makes the most sense. I guess what I'd like to see is the formulas that are being bandied around here that Jeff was working on, because it's fairly clear, looking both from the initial receipts that were turned in, that there are certain municipalities that were super hard hit by this. And although we were all impacted by the federal, state, and local efforts to flatten the curve and to prevent as many deaths as possible, we certainly know where most of the impact was as far as cases and deaths and dealing with those issues. And we know that some of our partners in the municipalities are continuing to deal with these issues, not just in public safety, but in housing, in relief, and in a variety of other ways. I have great confidence in our municipalities, especially in our largest municipality, which is vital for its survival. Its economic flourishing is vital for all of the communities that all of us represent in the entire county. And certainly the county was able to to quickly finds $38 million in needs. So I think with a budget that that's significantly more than ours, that's that the state has that. I think 15 million probably was initially was pretty low, and I think that it's a number that we should stick with as far as those formulas go. Again, I think there's a balancing act here between everyone being impacted by the EOs, and then whereas COVID itself was focused on just a handful of zip codes. So I guess, I don't know if now is the time or later is the time if we're not going to actually be making a decision, if we're sort of discussing and getting a sense. But it would be nice to see the formulas that Jeff has devised, or at least hear about them.
Jeff, do you have, I'm not sure which scenarios you have or what you have. Do you have something where we have maybe their initial estimates, which, to remind everyone, that was back in April, I believe. And then if we went to a system where we went just by population of the 15 million, or if we went by the 10-5 approach, I don't know if you've done that math or not, so we kind of discussed it quickly, but as just ideas, or do you want to wait? We could push this off, we're meeting in 2 more weeks, so we could discuss this further. I want to be careful of getting bogged down into essential needs and homelessness and all that, because we are addressing those in other lines. This was solely municipal costs, and I think it makes some sense to have some sort of indicator based on COVID, because we have that data. We have reliable data from our health department, so we know where, I think the city of Grand Rapids was impacted by almost 50% of those cases. So we do know where that is. That makes some sense. But again, I guess I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good either, in getting this money out and making sure that they can spend it how they see fit under the guidance of CARES and not under county scrutiny. So Jeff, I don't know if you've got that prepared or if you want to wait till the next meeting. It's up to you. If you think you've got it ready to go, we can throw it up there. If not, we can flush it out a little bit more.
I have some numbers. It's probably not pretty enough to share on the screen, but I can tell you what I've done. So a straight population base, what I would recommend is keep the 50 million in the pot, do an initial allocation based on population, and offer it to the communities. So what that would do is say, again, I'll use Ada Township as an example, based on population, they would get, if we've allocated the full 15 million, they would get offered about $333,000. Well, we're all pretty sure Ada Township is not going to have $333,000 worth of COVID expenses, especially in light of the fact that they've already received some CARES money through the state of Michigan. So my estimation is they would probably decline most of that revenue, and that would go back into the pot. Now, that's not 100% guarantee what that is, but my quick math of it is about 9 million originally would get accepted, about 6 million would go back into the pot. And then we could either reallocate the 6 based upon who submitted, or on case count, or however you wanted to do that second piece, like a 2-step process. So I think that'd be the quickest way to get it out the door. It offers money to all entities for their needs and meets those needs, and then but still provides the full 15 million to allocate to everybody.
Looks like Commissioner Steck had a question, comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bolter. Let me just jump off of Jeff's recommendation, because I think it does have a lot of logic to it. It has, it's sensible in that it allows us to get these monies out very quickly. It's a very equitable, easy to apply formula, and it does allow for the possibility, I guess probability, that we'll see some funds come back to us because various entities will not have qualifying expenses. I wanted to go back to what I understood when we first set aside these monies for the municipalities. It was with the expressed understanding that these were going to be monies used to reimburse public entities for extra expenses that they incurred because of COVID, and was not intended to be a reimbursement for regular budgeted costs that they incur, either for their fire or for their police. We know that the state or feds have changed that rule, and that now, in fact, regular budgeted expense for police would be a qualified expense. But we've never, best I understand as a committee, we've never made the decision to explicitly include that. So if we go with a per capita kind of allocation, and no longer are bird dogging the dollars, we're simply distributing it, leave it up to the entities to make the determination what expenses they have that qualify under the CARES Act. I'm going to presume that these entities that have policing agencies will deem those expenses to be covered expenses and apply it. So I guess for the ease of application and getting the money out, that would be acceptable to me. But I think we understand then that a number of agencies, including, my communities are Grand Rapids and Walker, who have police agencies that they fund, would have qualified expenses for their regular budget expenses for their policing. But it just strikes me that we are making it a much simpler process, and it is very equitable to go to a population basis, and particularly if we have the ability to come back and take a look at whether or not case counts is a justified alternative allocation or secondary allocation. We'll have time to look at that later. So I think it's a good idea. I would support Jeff's proposal to move forward and to move forward quickly in getting the money out under that formula.
Commissioner Talon.
Don't have my hand up, but
Oh,
I did
somebody
post
told me you did.
well, I did post a comment in the group chat, which I thought was an appropriate way to, I just wanted to comment that that issue of the state dollars in lieu of revenue sharing still feels like a shell game to me. And I think we got to be careful about considering that as COVID dollars as it relates to our allocation, but that's somewhat immaterial if we're going the direction that Jeff has proposed. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. We haven't really set the rules on the whole chat piece. Sometimes that's a little harder to follow. So I think if you're going to add something on chat, either you, Chair, or maybe the person making the comments does share those comments for the record verbally, that we can all follow, and other people following who might not have the chat feature. For example, if you're on the phone listening, you're not following the chat. And I just wanted to make that comment into the mix as we continue to dive into this. And then my next question is, are you looking for a motion?
I don't necessarily think we have to right now unless everyone's ready to go. I know Commissioner Skaggs has a question yet. I guess I want to give everybody the opportunity to weigh in. I personally don't feel like we're in a super hurry. But if we're ready to go and we do want to get this money out, we can take a motion now too. I really honestly don't have a preference. I would prefer that we try to get them the relief, but I know that some want to digest some of this, and we might want to see some of Jeff's analysis. So Commissioner Skaggs, do you have some input?
Yeah, I just, okay. So I was under the impression that there were multiple formulas that were being worked on in addition to just the straight population only. That Chair, that you mentioned, that $10 million and a $5 million bucket, and the $5 million bucket would be based on impact and not just raw population. So what were the other formulas that are being considered here? I don't know. And did we
Jeff,
actually?
you had given me a couple different options. The first option was what we're doing right now, which is the receipt analysis, is the best way I can describe it. Do you want to throw out those other couple?
Yes, we haven't done a whole lot of other ones. I mean, the population, and I do have the numbers based on number of cases per entity as well. So I have to be a little careful about sharing those due to the confidentiality notice. But I have those numbers based upon cases per entity. As you'll probably guess, the larger cities have more cases. There's not a whole lot of difference actually between the population percent and the case percent. Grand Rapids is probably the biggest difference between the two, but the rest of them are all actually fairly close, with most of the townships have a lower percent and a higher population percentage. we could continue with the reimbursement model. I think we've all realized that that's probably going to be, very hard to manage and ineffective. On the other piece then, if you wanted to base the initial allocation, as Mandy suggested, 10 million based on population, 5 million based on case. I know another entity in Michigan has done that. They did, I think, 9 and 1, 9 million based on population, 1 million based on case count. In the overall scheme of things, it doesn't impact the totals very much when I ran some numbers on it, but I'm open to any of those suggestions.
Yeah, I would just think that that again, we're dealing with our largest, I should say, not just Grand Rapids, but I mean, we have several other very significant jurisdictions in the county that we're doing a disservice and we're making the word equity and equitable essentially meaningless if we're not looking at the actual number of cases and the impact that we know that these municipalities are dealing with in addition to the work that we're doing. So I guess I'd still like to see the numbers about where those are at to make sure that Ada, I just think that its caseload is probably pretty low. In addition to its caseload is pretty low in East Grand Rapids. I want to see these funds go to the municipalities that are really coping with this on the front lines. So I'd still like to see these formulas before we move forward.
Okay.
And how they would actually work, out per municipality.
And I'm perfectly fine to do that. I just want to caution everyone that not everyone's going to be happy. So it is going to be what it is, and we can continue to belabor different metrics. Happy to do it, but we do represent the whole county. I understand we want to address the impact, so I'm happy to have Jeff run those. Keep in mind too that a lot of these municipalities, in his opinion, because Jeff, you've spoken to a lot of them, they most likely will return funds. So then we would need to determine and have some time to figure out how we want to then reallocate that. Do we want to reallocate that within the municipal bucket to those who received money and still think they need more? Do we want to reallocate that back into our reserve fund, which we're going to be taking a deeper dive into next week or 2 weeks? We will have Adam come in, and I do think we need to really continue to stay focused on the health impact of what's going on. Keep in mind, these numbers that we're discussing today were for government operations. It's not services that the health department's providing. It's not services that, homelessness and food assistance and PPE. It's for governments. So just want to put all that out there. Jeff will run the numbers. Looks like we have 2 more folks, Steck and Talon, that would like to speak, and we can push this off for the next meeting if you'd like. Commissioner Steck.
Well, if we're inclined to push it, thank you, Chair. If we're inclined to push it off, that's fine. I was going to see if we could focus a bit of this with a motion to go ahead and allocate 10 million of these allocated funds immediately on a pro rata basis. But it sounds like we're going to end up having to do an allocation twice if we did something like that, because some money is going to come back anyway. And at that point, we could look at, what's the second layer of equitable allocation? Equity and fairness is always in the eye of the beholder. So you're right. We're not likely to have unanimous agreement from all of our recipients. But it strikes me that moving forward with an initial allocation on a pro rata basis of a significant part of that does have a facial fairness and equity to it. It helps us in getting the money out quickly so that these entities that do need it and do have the right to it will be able to get it. And it'll help us define more quickly what do we have left to to do a second layer of analysis. Is the number of cases the second most equitable way of doing that? I don't know. It may not be. A case in Grand Rapids may be different than a case in Sparta, depending upon what the impacts of those are. I don't know yet, but it seems to me if we can move more quickly in getting a good component of this out the door, I would be supportive of that. If the sense is to wait until the next meeting, that's fine, but I would be prepared to get some of that money out now.
So
Linda,
if that's a motion, Ponstein seconds it.
well, can I just ask one quick question, Linda, on procedures? If we decide to allocate like the 10 million today by population, do we have to then still run that through full board? So is that another 2 weeks that we have to wait, or is this gonna go, if we vote on it now or in 2 weeks, it could immediately go? I guess I would be swayed to at least consider a portion of it now if we have to then continue to do some more procedural things.
Chair, the allocation was already made by the Board of Commissioners when we allocated the original distribution, the original buckets, if you will. This is just the actual elements or criteria by which that prior allocation will be distributed. So if you look at all of our programs that we've set up, the criteria for the small business or the nonprofits or anything else, those haven't gone to the big board. It's just the base allocation. So no, I would say that you're fine if this committee wants to establish criteria to distribute any or all of the 15 million that the Board of Commissioners has already allocated. That's within the realm of this committee this morning.
Okay, looks like Commissioner Talon and then Commissioner Womack.
Thank you, Chair. I was certainly tracking well with Commissioner Skaggs' concerns, and I would really prefer to see some of the numbers associated with the different options that that were being discussed prior to taking this up, and preferably early next week. I'd really like to have some time to look at those numbers and consider them, because I heard a lot of them today and would like to know how this affects particularly City of Grand Rapids, where my district is. I also mentioned in chat, one of the concerns I have is the law enforcement and dispatch costs, which our sheriff is certainly using COVID dollars to cover, and a lot of those local units will not have those, particularly the townships. Those are covered by the sheriff. So I think that's a factor as well, in addition to cases. We ought to consider that these units of government are different and have different costs related to their operation.
Commissioner Womack.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say that I think it's great that this formula does include consideration for positive cases where cities and municipalities, like the one I'm from the city of Grand Rapids, that does have more positive cases, there would be additional funding allocated besides the population. From what I'm understanding of this formula, somebody could make that more clear for me, because that's one of the things I thought that I heard. I also would like some time to get a breakdown on the funding we have already done to help businesses and the public at large through our funding sources and tentacles that are traced back to the COVID-19 allocated funds. There's not too many municipalities and cities that we haven't already touched with our COVID-19 CARES Fund. So the money that may be coming from this formula, that's not the only money that's really going through those municipalities and cities, as Kent County and organizations we work with have already begun to touch those. So I like this formula. I know there's some others out there, but I just wanted to touch on some of the positive things of this formula, and have a few questions like some of the other commissioners, but is not something that's catching me off guard. It's some horrific formula. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to have Jeff run the numbers for us. Again, sometimes I ramble, so just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, I'm trying to figure out a way that we can get money out equitably so that even smaller areas at least are offered something in a fair formula. Even if they refuse it, we've offered them that right of refusal. They most likely can't use it all, but that way we've reached every area of the county. I also have requested, and I don't know if Women has it ready today, but we'll have it for sure in 2 weeks. Again, where kind of a breakdown geographically of where a lot of these other lines, where the funding has gone. I think a lion's share of the business grant has went to the city. I think a pretty good share of the nonprofit grant has went into the cities. A lot of the homelessness sheltering and support. So I just want to be clear that this line is not all the support we're giving into the people of the city. This line is for the city and municipal governments. So I'm happy to continue to flush this out a little bit. We're going to meet in 2 more weeks. We'll have some more data. Jeff will have this to review, but I don't think we can make everyone happy because we do represent an entire county and not just a couple large cities. So I'm trying to figure out a way that we could overlay the effects of COVID, which would be the caseload, which is the data we have, and we could layer that on top of a baseline for some of these larger communities that have been more impacted by COVID as just a metric. So with that, looks like Commissioner Steck has another comment.
I just wanted to follow up. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to follow up on a comment from Commissioner Talon, which suggested that in our own use of the COVID CARES funds, we are covering the cost of our Sheriff Department operations. And it was my understanding that we are not doing that, and that if we had asked and applied the COVID CARES funds internally to cover all of our Sheriff Department operating costs as maybe is allowed under the CARES money, we basically use it all up. So am I right about that, that we are not using these funds internally to cover all of our costs for general operating of our Sheriff's Department?
Jeff, can you speak to that?
Yes, so right now the intent is because we received $4.5 million of additional CARES, excuse me, allocations from the state, I think we're gonna need to allocate payroll through June, public safety payroll through June to CARES money and charge that to that fund to be able to use those resources. So that, along with the buckets we've created for our own cost, should be enough to use up our allotment. After June, and I've talked to our auditors about that, about the legality of it, because I'm still not 100% convinced, quite frankly, that it's eligible. They were comfortable through June with it being eligible, but after that, it's more on a position by position case. You know, it has to be meet more of the criteria about budgeted and a different use and all those kinds of things. So right now, we're anticipating full use through June, and then on an allocation base as needed after that.
In full use, meaning we're applying that full use from the 115 or 114 million that we have through this fund?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So after June, it's only special costs that are demonstrated to be needed because of response to COVID.
Correct. Yep. That's the plan right now. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have a quick analysis. So if we did 10 million based on population, 5 million based on cases, I mean, I've got it completed. So for instance, back to Ada Township, they would get $6,800 less on that particular allocation under that method. Still get offered $326,000, almost $327,000. So, and I have this by each community. Again, most of the amounts are small. The biggest entity, Grand Rapids, would get almost $1 million more under that particular allocation if we did a 10 and 5. And as you make adjustments, if you did 9 and 6 or 8 and 7, you know, the changes are really smaller because the first population pot gets smaller, the other pot gets a little bigger. So, so that's kind of a general overview of what that does if we did that calculation.
Yeah, this is Stack. I'm not sure I'm still up or not. Maybe I'm still up, but I have not formally made the motion. I'm reading through Zoom the eyes of my colleagues suggesting that maybe we don't go ahead and do this motion at this point, and let's let this distill out. I think we're back in 2 weeks anyway as a committee. So
yes. And it looks like Jones and Talon still want to speak to this.
Okay.
I have one point of order in that our closed caption option runs out at 1 o'clock, and we need Steve Duarte to explain item 7. So if we could quickly wrap up, we'll revisit this in 2 weeks. Quickly, Commissioner Jones and Talon, and then I'd like to skip down to 7 so that Steve can provide us with the allocation update. And then we'll move back to 6 after Steve, if that's okay with everyone. Commissioner Jones and then Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. And I just wanted to say that we acted with urgency to get the business money out. And in my opinion, this shouldn't be any different. We have our process. Each municipality will have their process for accepting or not part of this. I believe time is an issue, and I don't mind if we circle back on this, but I would like to see us make some.
Diane, we lost you.
I just got cut off. Am I still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to be fair to board members that, you know, we need to see these play out. You know, maybe there's a scenario where you flip-flop it too and you do 5 and 10. Knowing that these smaller municipalities may not, if they're going to return the money anyway, maybe it makes more sense. I don't know. I don't think that would help some of these larger ones as much as people think it might. But we can have,
here's the other piece. From our last meeting to this meeting, I've been encouraging meeting more often. Can we meet next week Thursdays so we don't lose another week? Because those weeks are going to start to stack up closer and closer to the time we have to have all of this allocated. And I really want to see the 114.6 million utilized in our county where it needs to be utilized. I don't want to see that left on the table. So I just want to throw that out there, which we can circle back to because I know we're pressed for time to get Steve on. So maybe we can circle back to this after we get Steve's report.
Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Quickly, I would appreciate additional information on the allocation process that the sheriff is using, because my understanding, I have a pretty clear recollection that the sheriff had a formula that they were using to allocate a percentage of deputies' time toward the COVID reimbursement, as well as a portion of dispatch time for COVID reimbursement based on you know, some surveys they did initially, that type of thing, on how many of the calls were related to COVID issues. So I would just like to verify that that's what they're using after the state dollars are used and after we finish using that state formula. And also would appreciate having all that stuff in writing as soon as we can next week. Thanks.
We'll work on that. Thank you, Commissioner Talon. Any other comments, questions? Let's agree that we will run some numbers. We will discuss this, and I'd like to vote on something in the next meeting. I'm open to everyone messaging me your thoughts on next week versus 2 weeks. I do want to note that staff did ask me for 2 weeks to have a more robust understanding of the reserve fund and kind of where we're at in terms of health potential needs, which is my largest concern, as well as we'll have a better idea of where we're at with some of these homeless and sheltering issues. So, you know, I'm open. Send me your messages on meeting next week versus 2 weeks, but just know that that was a request by staff, and particularly Steve, who thought he could have a more detailed analysis for us in the 2-week time frame. Commissioner Womack's asking if we could get some input from Wayman about 1 week versus 2 weeks.
I think if we could move to next week, I would love to see it happen because I agree that we need to move on and get these dollars out. So we can work to accommodate that schedule based on what you need to make that decision. So I would love to see us move to do another meeting next week.
Okay.
At a time.
Okay, we'll connect with everyone's schedules because it's not previously scheduled, and then we'll move on. I would like to get Stephen, if you'll all indulge me, I'd like to skip to item 7 and get Steve Duarte teed up to address item 7 on our agenda, the allocation plan.
Good morning. If we could put up the financial report on the screen, I'll walk through it. What we have here is the financial report that we introduced last time at this meeting.
Is everyone else's screen clear or is it jumbled?
Mine is clear.
Oh, okay, must be my internet, sorry.
I'm ready. Okay, this is a report we introduced last time, the report on the expenditure buckets by bucket. This represents our best estimate of where we're at through 9/8 or 9/8 of 2020. And I'm going to run down some very general things because most of this stuff has been discussed all through the meeting. I will say that for the past 2 weeks and going forward, we've been analyzing expenditures to see where we might come up with some reallocation recommendations for the board in a week or so. County expenses going down the left side. The only thing I really want to point out there is that the bottom line there, the various unallocated is quite large and justifiably so. And within the buckets, we have moved down $2 million from the homeless one up on above for the health department because that issue is being dealt with Sandra and some other funding sources to take care of that, and we've moved it down into the various unallocated. But I would point out to the right that the final or the last column on the right, even with that transfer, a couple $1 million, we anticipate being a couple $1 million over the allocation we have. There are some things that we can do with that, as Jeff has suggested. We may charge some of these Sheriff's Department expenses to the CARES money that we received as part of the revenue sharing, and that would free up some money within these buckets to cover that. The shift does nothing in terms of the total allocation. We remain at 35 million, which we allocated to the county. So it's just a shift. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them. If not, under the business assistance, next item down, the only point I would have is that these numbers from our perspective reflect very closely to what you already heard from the update. Third column over looks at our total commitments between encumbered and spent is about 13.9 million. Why there is a little discrepancy is the timing, what they have in their possession versus what we have in our possession. But it's moving forward. Mitigation.
Steve, can I stop you 1 second? On the PPE, am I reading right that we allocated 3 million and we're down to 654,000 left in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are reading it right. We still anticipate being able to spend that by the end of the year. As far as I know, based on current rates, we're fine with that. We don't believe we'll have to add more to it. We'll be able to expend it.
That would certainly be a discussion item for next meeting when we discuss the balance of the reserve. So just wanted to clarify where we were at with that.
Yeah, we will be following up on that just like we will all of these. And if anything changes, we will absolutely update you at the next meeting. Mitigation of homelessness, the $1.5 million that we show in budget that hasn't been allocated is in fact in process of getting contract. We have a recommendation. Before that, we expect that will take place in the next day or so. You're well aware of the rent eviction program of the Salvation Army and $1 million that we have contracted, and Family Promise has apparently already billed us for 413 and expects to bill us for the other 87 promptly. So we'll spend that $500,000 quickly. Vulnerable population, again, I think the key point to me is that third one down, not-for-profits run by a United Way program. If you look to the third column, we spent over $5 million between expenses and encumbrances. Both the Chamber and the United Way assure us that in September, October, they will have went through their total allocation, and I expect that to be true. With the moving down to internet access, there's still a report to come to you. There's not much been put out the door yet, as you can see, small. The school program, it appears we have gotten out $692,000, and there's $1.3 million that we expect to allocate, or we have committed and expect will be done shortly. And finally, the local unit of government, we show the whole $15 million allocated as encumbered, and so we expect to spend all of that through some allocation process that the board approves. And that leaves us with a reserve of about $18 million that we will obviously be talking about whether some suggestions or how we might want to reallocate that money in a couple of weeks. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions on this bucket list? Don't see any hands. So we may change up the format a little bit on this for next time we meet regarding this, but I think we have a pretty good showing. And then my intention is Steve and Wayman would also present to us any additional requests we've received that may not be in a bucket. Commissioner Skaggs, I'll get to you. Yep, for sure. See ya. And then that way we can kind of look at where we're at, how much is left, and then do we need to look at additional allocations. And like I said, Adam London did tell me he may have some updates for us in terms of anticipation of a vaccine and how we would need to change up operations in terms of implementing that. For example, large scale refrigerators and additional mobile units and stuff like that. So I would anticipate that we will have additional costs there. So with that, Commissioner Skaggs?
So the baseline executive summary here is we have $18 million, although we just gave $5 million to that. So we really have $13 million. Is that correct?
Well, we have 13 million plus, as you'll see, a lot of these buckets haven't been spent. Yeah.
Right. But in our unallocated, we have 13 million.
Steve, is that your understanding?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I also think we may identify some other much smaller amounts that may be available for allocation, but the core reserve will be about 13 million after we put the 5 million into that program.
And again, I think a lot of it will depend on what we end up deciding with the municipal lines, because if we do, depending on how we do this, if we do decide to kick it out and municipalities determine that they can't use it, do we want to put that back into the municipal line, or do we want to put it into additional line for schools or additional line for PPE or additional into the reserve? We're going to have to discuss that. So that might be an additional reserve amount. We won't know right away, but just to mention that. Any other hands, questions, comments? Okay, Steve, we'll plan on you being the star of the show next time we meet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna pop back up to 6, the Wi-Fi access point update. Wayman, do you want to give us an update on that?
Yeah, and Mary Beth is on the line as well. We have worked out an agreement with the Right Place to have them take the project forward, but Tim Roz is on the line from the Right Place, along with Mary Beth. Mary Beth, are you there? Just give a quick update and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so yeah, for the updates, working with Tim Roz, the Right Place, to assist with the remainder of the project through the end of the year. We have 10 townships that are in progress, 3 pending. We have 20 park locations that are in progress, which leaves us about 120 unallocated devices. And Tim has already started reaching out to the cities and will be working with them to allocate the balance of those devices.
Tim, do you want to give us an update? I know you've only been on board for a very short time. Do you have any additional comments you want to make? And thank you,
Yeah.
thank you for your help.
Well, hey, I will admit I've been meeting with Mary Beth and Wayman on this project, and the yeoman's work on this project has already been completed. So anything I can do to help get it across the finish line at this point, I'm always willing to help. I don't know who's controlling the screen, but if you can scroll down to that second page at the bottom, I think I provided an update on some of the cities. As Commissioner Bolter said, I just started on this project on Tuesday. So yesterday I started making phone calls. You can see some of the city work that I have. I started working with the 6 urban core cities to begin with. Today I have to reach out to the city of Cedar Springs, city of Rockford, and city of Lowell. So far, there's been, resounding support for this. Obviously, the devil's in the details for a lot of these folks. Lots of questions on ongoing maintenance and upkeep of these things once they're installed. So I will be meeting with many of these municipalities. You see some of the dates. We've already outlined a meeting with the city of Walker tomorrow. I've already spoken with the city of Walker. We'll be meeting with them on Monday. Wyoming, and I did have a chance late last night to touch base with Megan Saul, and I did touch base with Mark Rambo this morning out in Kentwood. So I am also, Mark has also offered to bring this up on the 23rd of September in these groups, the UMS meeting, the Urban Mayor and Managers meetings, so we can have a group discussion, because hopefully that will speed things up as well, instead of having individual discussions with individual cities. So I also did, Commissioner Skaggs, I did have a conversation with Doug Lefebvre yesterday afternoon. Doug is in support of this as well. So.
Any questions or comments? Wow, we've gotten a lot done. Like you said, our county staff did a lot of work in the front end of this and the mapping, and I think this is a great partnership to really expedite things. So that's so thankful that we have everyone on this team effort. Commissioner Skaggs, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, just want to echo everything the chair said as far as thank you goes, and certainly excited to have you on board, Tim. I just want to make sure that what we discussed before, that we would look at park locations, both county parks and municipal parks as well, as spaces where we think, this makes sense, giving parking and all. I know we talked about neighborhood associations at some point. And then the Grand Rapids Public Library Wi-Fi, we're going to be offering to them as well as the KDL.
No, that was
They
taken
already
off the
have it.
board, right? This is just mapping out where we currently have public Wi-Fi throughout the county. And then we are adding access points to that as we built out to the different municipalities. Because when we started this project, we wanted to have just a good look at what already exists in the public access Wi-Fi sector. And so that's where this mapping began. And both the Grand Rapids Public Library and the Kent District Libraries already provide Wi-Fi access out to their parking lot. And so that's why they're showing up on this map. at the end of the project, we'd like to be able to give our residents kind of a clear understanding of here's all the access points in Kent County where you can hop online.
And then do we think that those KDL and Grand Rapids Library Wi-Fi's are the equivalents of the technology that we're looking at?
They are similar. They both have assured that they reach through their parking lot.
Okay. I guess then I just want to emphasize that I think that we should offer this up to all parks, given that we have the sort of public space for them. Maybe not all, there might be little pocket playground parks we don't need to do. But especially the parks that have the parking lot capability, if we think that's how most people are going to access this. Certainly not all, certainly some will walk. But just to make sure, again, that we're reaching out to the county as a whole. Is that where we're at?
Yes. In fact, a lot of the townships that we've been in communication with have identified their park locations as spaces where they would want to put these devices. And I imagine that will be the same as Tim continues to work with cities, that they'll identify city parks that they'll want to put these devices.
I was going to say, just to follow up on that, Commissioner Skaggs, my conversation with Mark Rambo in Kentwood and Doug Matthews at City of Grand Rapids both specifically surrounded city parks, city-controlled parks.
Great. That's awesome. I'm super excited about this. I know this was, one of the chair's primary, areas of interest, and I share that, and just, want to thank everyone, especially Mandy for working so hard on this. I think this is going to be, a long-lasting success story coming out of this.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I don't see any other hands. Just on this map, I do want to just remind everyone that some of these townships, that they're very expansive, and so where we have a KDL, that's great, but we may need to offer, especially some of these very northern townships that don't have even the ability to purchase broadband service. I want to be sure that we're offering up multiple locations within that township. Maybe it goes to a school building, or maybe it goes to a Meyer or something, but I just want to make sure we're really emphasizing there's even pockets in Cascade, this won't shock Commissioner Skaggs, that can't get internet. They have one option, and that's Cascade, and we're 2 miles off of 28th Street. So I just want to be sure that we're really putting a priority on everybody, but especially those communities that can't even if they wanted to order up internet. So just a plug for multiple locations in some of these rural areas if possible. We have 120 to put up yet, so our places to identify. So I just want to really make sure that we're making that available.
Correct. And Chair, we can build this out so that you can see exactly how many units are going to each township, because we do have some that we're putting in several.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great work. Awesome work. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Can we go back to the agenda? Questions, comments, concerns? I think that brings us to the end of the items on our agenda. Oh, I lost my agenda. Okay, we'll open it up for miscellaneous. Does anyone want to chime in on miscellaneous today before we go to public comment? Don't see any hands.
Chair, yep, got my hand up. It's Jim.
Oh, Commissioner Talon.
Thank you. Wayman had indicated to me in an email that we would be getting an update on the work happening in the mitigation of homelessness area. Wondering if, I don't want to extend the meeting, we've heard a little bit, but I'm wondering if we could get something in writing in the next couple days to take a look at. And I'm really concerned because I still have a lot of contacts working in that area, and I hear different things from them than I hear from county staff. So it'd be good to have in writing what county staff understands to be the situation and where money is coming from and when it will be going out.
And we can do that. And there's a document that we can push right out to you and the subcommittee.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think, Wayman, would it be helpful, or has that already went out, the document that Sandra went through with Human Services this morning was really, really
We can
helpful.
include that as well, yes.
Yeah, and I guess, Commissioner Talon, I would encourage you, after you get those documents, and if you still have questions or concerns, there's nothing that says you need, have meetings, I feel like the committee is pretty set in terms of getting those updates, but if you want a more enhanced information, please feel free to set up those meetings. Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Bolter. Can we circle back on the meeting schedule? And one of the things I had proposed was potentially meeting next week for just the government funding discussion, get that hopefully moved into a direction, and then still meeting the following week for the other agenda items we've discussed.
Does anyone want to chime in on that? Do we want to meet weekly, then the next week, and then again the following week?
I think that'd be great. This is Jim.
Commissioner Steck, Commissioner Breivy, Commissioner Ponstein.
I'll be sitting at my desk, so that's fine.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
We can have another meeting.
It will be my birthday, so we're going to be meeting for CARES again. Why wouldn't we? It's 2020. Okay, so any other miscellaneous today?
If it's your birthday, do we do a virtual Costco cake?
I'm super bummed I won't get an actual Costco cake, but whatever. All
I
right.
was thinking that too.
Let's move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment in the email section today or anything in the chat? I'm looking for hands raised. Don't see any.
And no messages in the inbox.
Okay. Well, we are then going to adjourn, and we will adjourn until September 17th. What time do we want to make that? Do we want to make that a 9:30? A 9, an 8:30? TBD?
9:30 works good for me. 9 does too.
Okay, we'll send out a notice and get that scheduled. The intention would be to flush out the municipality decision, and so we will hope to have some more enhanced documents for everyone to review, and we'll go from there.
And
We are
if
adjourned.
we could
Thank you,
please have
everyone.
those, if we could please have those documents in advance of the meeting, that would be great.
We'll do our best. Thank
Thanks.
you.